Tener que plus an infinitive is used to talk about obligations. You may remember from the tener tutorial that tener is used to talk about possession, obligation, and it's used in special phrases that we call expressions with tener. In this tutorial we will be talking about using tener to talk about obligations, and to do that we have to use the setup that we call tener que plus infinitive. Now you might be asking yourself, what is an infinitive? An infinitive is a verb that has not been conjugated, or in other words, it's a verb that's in its original form. In English, infinitives always have the word to in front of them: to study, to eat, to leave. Talking about obligations and using an infinitive would sound like I have to study, we have to eat, they have to leave. In Spanish, infinitives end with AR, ER, or IR, so for these same verbs we would have estudiar, comer, and salir. If you haven't watched the tener tutorial, you should probably go back and do that now before you watch the rest of this tutorial. However, just as a brief overview, here is the verb chart conjugated in the present tense for the verb tener. As we go through a few examples, I'm going to leave the verb chart down here in the corner of the screen so that we can refer to it as necessary. We already talked about examples in English of talking about obligation with the verb to have. For instance, we might say, I have to study. In Spanish, we're going to follow essentially the same pattern. If we look at our chart, we remember that I, or yo, is in the first row and in the first column. It is tengo. So we can say yo tengo, that means I have, and then we see that we have to use the word que because it's tener que, and then we already said that an infinitive is a verb in its original form, and we saw the verb estudiar. So there we have it, yo tengo que estudiar. Now tengo means, or yo tengo means I have, estudiar means to study, and that means that the word que doesn't really translate to anything. That's okay. When you are learning Spanish or any language, you have to keep in mind that the two languages don't always line up perfectly. So we could not really translate this word for word, but the word que is an essential part here, so we just have to remember this pattern, tener que plus infinitive. Let's look at another example. We have to leave. The we form is the nosotros form. Here it is, tenemos. So we can say nosotros tenemos, then we add the word que because that's just the rule. And as we saw a minute ago, the word for to leave is salir. So we have nosotros tenemos que salir. Tener que plus an infinitive is a very common construction in Spanish. You'll use it all the time, you'll run across it all the time. As you can see, it's pretty simple to use. There's nothing difficult or tricky about it. You just have to know your forms of tener. You have to remember to put in the word que, even though it doesn't translate directly into English. And you have to remember to use an infinitive, that is, a verb in its original form.